Welcome into another episode of the Young Terps podcast. Ahmed Gafir and Mason Viner. Ahmed, Terps taking their talents to Chicago, a place they have not won yet in the Big Ten. Let's start it off with what Maryland can accomplish with a win on Saturday.
Yeah, Maryland still with a chance to pick up that sixth win, become bowl eligible for the third straight season for the first time since 2006 to 2008. And they get a chance to win their first six out of their eight games in two consecutive seasons. The first time Maryland has done that since 2001, 2002. And in order to do so, they will need to pick up their second straight win against Northwestern. But like you said, Mason, first one on the road.
Yeah, must win. I definitely think so, Ahmed. Terps really need to get to six, really need to get back on track, and hopefully we see some of the guys back on the field. I know Locks talked about that. We'll hit on that later in the show, but do you call it a must win?
Oh, 100%. I mean, especially if you look at just one coming out of the bye, to looking at how Maryland kind of fared second half against Ohio State in a game where it kind of felt like, Maryland probably should have won this game. And then, Illinois, obviously, that was really the first game of what ifs for Maryland this season. Missed just poor execution, missed assignments, dumb penalties, all the things that you kind of thought Maryland kind of needed to take that next step. And like you said, Locks we'll hit on all the starters that are expected back, kind of what to expect there. But just even with a lot of those starters out, you kind of need to put that Illinois game to bed permanently. So I think kind of coming out of this by just a chance to really solidify that, and then obviously you look at Penn State next on the schedule, so you kind of need to pick this up to kind of avoid a potential 3-game slide, and the slate only gets tougher from there on out.
Yeah, that certainly is true. Let's take a look at Northwestern. But before we get to that, this podcast is brought to you by Watercrafters. Watercrafters in Gaithersburg, Maryland has been providing swimming pool service and supplies to Montgomery and Howard County for the past 41 years. Watercrafters' highly skilled service staff can open and close your pool, as well as provide new equipment installations, repairs, weekly service, and winter service. The Gaithersburg retail showroom has everything for your swimming pool, including chemicals, parts, and fun accessories. Visit Watercrafters in the Gaithersburg Air Park or online at watercrafters.com. Ahmed, Northwestern comes into this game 3-4 on the season, 1-3 in conference plays, wins coming against UTEP, Minnesota, and Howard, and losses all against Power 5 opponents. 3 Big Ten losses come against Rutgers, Penn State, and Nebraska. They also dropped a game to what has turned out to be a very good Duke team earlier in this year.
Yeah, and that Howard game, was definitely a lot closer. I believe the final score was 23-20, if memory serves correct. But again, Northwestern, I think a lot of people, obviously, when the Pat Fitzgerald news dropped preseason, I think a lot of people kind of look at Northwestern as probably an easy win, or at least a team that would probably be down compared to year over year standards and expectations in that program. But like you said, all 4 of those losses. Rutgers is probably a middle of the pack Big Ten team this year. Duke's done really well, obviously, it's sliding into the top 25 there, and Nebraska is really the only one where maybe it's a head scratcher. But again, Northwestern, think on offensive and defensive side of the ball, they have some bright spots, just not haven't been able to really put it together for 60 minutes yet.
No, they haven't. Certainly led by what I feel like is a rising coach in the profession, David Braun, who came from North Dakota State, where he was part of multiple national championship teams. He's stepped into what was a tough situation, but ultimately he's got a defense that's playing pretty well and an offense that is definitely struggling right now.
Yeah, I mean, to kind of kick it off with the defense there, obviously it starts with Rice Gallagher, younger brother of Blake Gallagher there, the Northwestern linebacker, sits third in the Big Ten, 26th nationally, and with 64 total tackles, one of 2 Big Ten players with 60 tackles and 2 tackles for loss this season. So definitely going to be a name to know there. And then on the edge, Anto Saka, even though Northwestern hasn't done a great job kind of getting to the quarterback, disrupting the pocket, which is going to be really big for Maryland to kind of get back on track offensively. Anto Saka is definitely a name that a lot of Maryland fans have maybe recognized. My opinion, he was probably the best pass rusher in that recruiting class locally with Denise Sutton as well going to Penn State as well. But Saka's looked good with 3 tackles for loss in his first 5 career games. So looks like he's going to be kind of that primary guy. But again, just kind of defensively overall, a lot of bright spots, but still, like I said, sit last in sacks, second to last in interceptions, gained, sitting the bottom on run defense, total defense, scoring defense. So a lot of chances for Maryland to kind of, like I said, just kind of reestablish its identity on offense.
Yeah, I mean, to me, watching this team is yeah, they struggle in the stats. They've had games that they've looked good, games that they've looked awful. There really hasn't been a game that I think that Northwestern's looked great in, or like they can really do much. Last week, more the same. Brendan Sullivan, who I guess we'll talk about a little bit more in a minute. Maryland fans saw him last year. He stepped back in starting quarterback spot, and this offense is just frankly dead in the water right now.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, the offense just not looking too good, and the quarterback situation there, Ben Bryant looks like he is expected to, at least his status is uncertain for this weekend. But it looks like Brendan Sullivan, who faced Maryland last year, will make his third consecutive start again this week. 61.4% completion percentage, 3 touchdowns, 3 passing touchdowns, and an interception, while adding a pair of rushing touchdowns as well. So, Loxley talked about obviously Bryce Kurtz there, that primary wide receiver, but said, obviously he has that big playability. But when you look at stopping Northwestern this weekend, it starts with stopping the run. And I think it's kind of a change for that Maryland front seven, which has really largely been dominant and kind of been able to keep opponents' run game in check. Is a chance for them to kind of keep this Northwestern team, just unable to generate much momentum there.
Yeah, for this team, it's an old fashioned kind of same offense that Pat Fitzgerald was running, very much pro style. They're gonna try and establish the run early and run the ball a fair amount in this game. I mean, Sullivan not much different than the guy we saw last year. He's going to make the plays if you allow him to, but he's not in any stretch of the word like a game breaking quarterback, or you're really going to be able to hurt you much with the deep ball for Maryland. Look, I see it the same as I saw the game against Illinois. If you stay disciplined, stay in your rush lanes, don't allow guys to run open deep into the secondary. It's a team you can probably hold to, 9 to 21 points at the most. If you don't do that and you give them opportunities, just like any Power Five team, and especially teams in the Big Ten, they'll take advantage of that and be able to put up some points. So I think this is a game that when you look at the grand scheme of things, you got to step up. Your front seven has got to produce for you, like you just mentioned, and guys just have to keep it together upstairs well enough to win this game and move on to next week, where they're going to have hopefully a big home game.
Yeah, and I think just kind of the last 2 matchups for this Maryland secondary, when you look at them going against Marvin Harrison Jr. And then Isaiah Williams there with Illinois. Again, Bryce Kurtz, he enters the weekend, like Loxy talked about, has that big playability. We talked about, just kind of leads the team, ranked 6th in the Big Ten in receiving yards, sits 2nd in the Big Ten with 70.5 receiving yards per game. So he has that big playability, and I think that back line is maybe. I think the safety tandem I think has been good, but maybe that starting cornerback tandem, Jaquan Shepard, kind of stepping up and kind of being able to solidify himself as that lockdown corner, and kind of eliminating the big plays, keep kind of being able to still keep everything in front of you. I think that's kind of the big thing, and I think that's something that Maryland will be able to kind of maybe prove, especially with Drew Alar and that Penn State rushing attack looming right around the corner.
Yeah, talk about the defensive backfield. I mean, this is a game where I think the third corner is still something that's highlighted on my list of I guess ask somebody to emerge in that spot. You mentioned Shepard, kind of maybe not there yet. Dante Trader still maybe a little bit banged up, so we'll see kind of where he fits into the game plan, where Glenn Miller fits into his spot in this game. I would really like to see Perry Fisher, Lionel Whitaker, maybe Gavin Gibson's 1 week healthier, and he starts to look back. Some of the bright spots start to show for him in his game. But ultimately, like you said, and you got a big play wide receiver on the other side, and another SEC transfer in that wide receiver room that has 29 catches on the season. So if the guys win in man on man, if Corey Coley is kind of out there, I hate to call him out like that, but suddenly they do have some guys that are gonna beat Maryland's further down the depth chart corners.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail right on the head there. Obviously, Kim Johnson, AJ Henning, those are two other guys for Northwestern that AJ Henning is a guy that, he'll probably be used both in the run and pass game a little bit. So kind of, just other weapons there. So obviously, just needing that second and third corner. Corey Coley's kind of been that third corner for Maryland this year. And when Tarheeb still was inactive, it was Coley who has started and played and stepping into some pretty big roles there. Obviously, Glenn Miller's been a big asset in the secondary safety as well, filling in for Dante Trader, Bo Braid as well. But yeah, you definitely want to see kind of maybe that weight behind the starters. Gavin Gibson, Lionel Whitaker, Perry Fisher, like you mentioned, just kind of being able to take that next step and ultimately show that they can be the future of that cornerback room.
Yeah, so well, we mentioned Targeep still, so let's get into the rest of the injuries. Ahmed, who do we expect to be back on the field on Saturday?
Yeah, we obviously, Maryland is coming off a long list of players that were out against Illinois. Dante Trader, Corey Bullock, Tarheeb Still. All those guys were back on the field today. Corey Dyches was back out there as well. Dante Trader was not working with the first team safeties. It was Glenn Miller and Bo Braid with the one-on-ones there, or excuse me, the first team against first team offense defense into the open portion of Tuesday's practice. As mentioned, Corey Bullock back in there with Gotti Edzi back at right tackle. Mike Purcell was the center working with the first team unit during practice on Tuesday as well. Like I said, Corey Dyches, that's a big boost back for that cornerback room, or so the tight end room, excuse me. So kind of ultimately expect him to be used as well. And Loxley was confident who was available at the podium today. So a lot of key guys back, and think the Illinois game kind of exposed some of those absences.
Yeah, before we talk about some off the field stuff and some basketball, favorite part of the show, betting lines for the game. Ahmed, Terps, 13.5 point favorite, over under at 48.5. Not much movement on this one. Ahmed, we liked Maryland last time, and I think that definitely came back on us. Do we like the Terps getting or laying 13 on the road?
Yeah, initially I kind of had it, kind of right on the cusp there. I'll actually go Northwestern with the points, but I do think Maryland is able to win it. I just kind of for some reason expect it to be in a little bit of an ugly game. I think that Northwestern front, could still present some challenges. I think Maryland has done a good job of kind of protecting Talia for the most part. Obviously, the Ohio State game, some ebbs and flows there. But I think Maryland will be able to kind of do enough, generate enough of those big plays, and ultimately be able to limit Northwestern enough to where two touchdowns, anything more than that is kind of hard for me to imagine from the Wildcats going into this weekend. So I do think that Maryland does cover, and I'll go slightly under that 48.5.
Yeah, I have to say I like Maryland. Give the 13.5 to Northwestern. I just can't see this Northwestern team scoring very many points, especially if Sullivan's in the game. That's a guy that Maryland's faced. You got to remember a lot of the teams that he's played against this year, where he's put up some decent numbers. They've never seen this guy before. So a lot of the Terps secondary pieces played in the game last year. They have that recognition of the quarterback for Northwestern. So I like Maryland's defense really to win them this game. As far as this offense goes, I think it's a get right game. I think some of those deep balls will come open for Caden Prather, for Jay Sean Jones, for Ty Felton. Hopefully, they're just able to make the catches and put up the points. I also lean the over in this game. I just think Maryland gives up like a garbage time touchdown that hits that number. Um, but I really could see Northwestern keeping it close for three quarters of this game and making a lot of Maryland fans uncomfortable.
Yeah, I could see that. I think Maryland, if they're kind of able to stop the run there, which they've kind of been able to show at times, I think they'll kind of be able to keep Northwestern in check. Just kind of we're interested to see how Maryland is able to do offensively, and I think again kind of similar to Illinois, and especially just kind of with the weather against Illinois, you kind of looked at that game as a chance for Maryland's rushing attack to really get it going. So I think that you kind of going into this game there's a chance for Maryland to kind of establish some consistency again on the ground. Again, Loxley talked about it. There's obviously a little bit more efficiency in the passing attack than the running game. So until we see otherwise, it's really you expect the big plays on offense to really come through the air, and for Talia to be able to find, like you said, the timing, and for guys like Caden Prather and Ty Felton to kind of make the most of their opportunities downfield. But I think Maryland will be able to manufacture enough of those possessions, and potentially win the turnover battle this weekend as well.
Yeah, off the field news coming and some disappointing news for Maryland. Kevin Sumlin, who stepped in as a tight ends coach and co-offensive coordinator for this season, arrested over the weekend down in Florida. Ahmed, uh, where does Maryland go from here?
Yeah, obviously, Mike Locksley said he's away from the team right now. He will face repercussion. If you kind of look back at historically how Maryland has been able to handle this, you kind of know what to expect. So, whether we see Sumlin again this year, it'll be kind of interesting. How long he's gone for. That's a big storyline for the rest of the last month and change of the regular season. During the open portion of practice on Tuesday, we saw analyst Louis Swaba. He was working with the unit tight ends or assistant tight ends coach Preston Brown was right there with the unit as well, working with them. So, you kind of obviously fill in by committee to kind of Rob Ambrose is another guy. He wasn't working with the tight end room today, but just another guy to kind of help pick up the slack that obviously comes with someone being away from the program. So. I don't expect any immediate any immediate news on what his long term future is with the program, but for now, definitely a storyline that I'm sure Mike Locksley did not want to entertain coming out of the bye weekend.
No, certainly did not. Disappointing news for the program. On the basketball side, Terps big visitor this week. Derik Queen takes his official to Maryland.
Yeah, he's coming off his official visit this past weekend. Maryland, this was almost came exactly a year ago to the day from his last official visit to Maryland, and since then, obviously Tony Skinn was on the staff last year, and that was a big driver for Maryland. The Derik Queen sentiment for him to come home, that still looms large in his recruitment, still loomed large heading into this weekend, where the whole team was back out, excuse me, not back out, but was out in Baltimore on Saturday morning, supporting John Lamoth, his mom, for her walk in Baltimore there, and with Derik Queen there as well. So, definitely an emphasis to kind of make sure that he felt at home, and to kind of prioritize, hey, you're the stay-at-home hero. Obviously, had some graphics going around of him at, I believe it was Ruth Chris, DQ, time to come home, things like that. So, definitely, the stay home message remains large. NIL has been something that, frankly, has been discussed with Kevin Willard. It feels like ever since he took the job. I remember, getting a text about it, during the baseball run. I think it was couple of weeks after Willard was officially announced there. So, has been a emphasis through the summer for Willard to be able to make sure that that's not a final deterrent for Maryland. So, we'll see. Looks like Maryland's still in a great position there. Obviously, Indiana, Houston, primary contenders. He took official visits to LSU, Kansas as well, and whether Kansas is how actively they're kind of involved, kind of seems to be kind of a little bit of a gray area right now. But we'll see. Obviously, Maryland would love to kick off their 2024 class with undoubtedly its biggest target this cycle, and you can make the argument that he's probably the biggest target regardless, next to maybe Jameer Young and Deshaun Harris Smith.
Yeah, certainly a huge recruitment for Willard, especially with missing out on a couple of guys the Terps were chasing throughout the cycle. But it seems like the longer it drags on, just the more different teams are going to pop up and fall out, just given, certain teams have landed guys they really want that are on the top of the list, and others I'm sure will miss, and they'll try and, maybe sneak into this recruitment.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's less about, I mean, in my mind, it's less about um, teams being able to swoop in. I think it's now until commitment day, the worry would be from an NIL perspective. Just a Kansas or a Houston or an Indiana just coming in and throwing the kitchen sink at him. And that kind of being, maybe is that a hurdle too much to climb? Obviously, Queen's desire to come home has long been there. Obviously, you've been able to point to Julian Reese, his development in year one into year two. going into, or excuse me, under Kevin Willard here, and then obviously being able to point to Sandro, the former Seton Hall forward, in ways to be able to use Derik Queen. So I think from everything else, Maryland really does check all the boxes. It's just from an NIL perspective, and in today's college athletics, you never know until you know. So I think that's kind of the big focus there. But again, Maryland's kind of made that a focus throughout, but I heard similar through Hunter Dickinson. So we'll see. Obviously, not the same comparison or the same recruitment there between Derik Queen, Hunter Dickinson there, but we'll see. So I think right now, just kind of the gray area is when he ultimately decides to pull the trigger there.
Yeah, and we'll wait and see. And Ahmed, of course, will have the scoop over on InsideTheBlackAndGold.net, where you can follow all of our coverage of the game this weekend. I will be out there in Evanston, coverage over on Wayne Terp on YouTube, on terptalk.com, live from the game. I'm looking forward to it. Looking forward to seeing a lot of you out at the, I guess, Chicago Terps alumni event before the game. And we'll, of course, be back here on the podcast after the game, breaking down hopefully what is a Maryland win and a big game coming to College Park, as Penn State will roll in next week. Ahmed, anything else to add?
No, I mean, like we said, I think it's a chance for Maryland to reestablish itself and find its groove, and kind of like we said, Michigan, Nebraska, Penn State, that's a grueling three. Rutgers is no slouch either. So when you talk about must win, yeah, I would definitely say that. So again, just like Illinois on paper, Maryland looks to be the better team. It's all about whether they execute, and I think doing so on the road would definitely go a long way.
Yeah, make sure to follow this podcast on Twitter at YoungTerp1. All of our socials scrolling across the bottom. Make sure to like and subscribe this podcast wherever you get it. And as always, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.